Welcome back. It's the Basic Architect here. Yeah, you are here and we're in the Passive House 11 series, and I believe this is episode 12. Yeah, so just a pretty picture of the house. You know, when we talk about air sealing, we talk about 6 sides of the box, right? So when I look at a house like this, right, we have one side here, which is the floor. And then we basically, yes, this is multiple facets, but we have this one side here, we have that side, we have the 2 around the back side, but then we also have this ceiling in there. So that's basically our 6 sides of the box, right? Floor assembly, ceiling assembly, walls, 4 walls. Maybe they're a little bit more than actually 4 walls, but you get my point. Today we're going to talk about what is that air sealing strategy and how did we accomplish it there. You know, the walls, that's pretty easy. We used zip sheathing there. It was, remember, this was designed in 2009 and built in 2010, certified in 2011. And so, you know, we're 14 years ago on a design here. Zip was in its infancy. And we used that as our strategy to the wall, but I really want to concentrate on the ceiling because I learned a few things, and this was basically the very first time we did a number of things on the ceiling, and we're going to talk about those firsts today. So let's jump to the floor plan and take a look. So this is the floor plan of the second floor. All right. And you can see, not a whole lot of magic. We already talked about this. It's a double wall structure. Right. Around the perimeter there's a bunch of, you know, walls on the inside, basically making up the floor plan. No magic yet. Stairway. We have a couple bathrooms there. This is just showing the location of the water heater down below and its relative nature to all of the plumbing. It was a very efficient house in that respect from the plumbing aspect. So, air barrier strategies for the ceiling. We have a couple available to us now, but back then, here, my answer was, let's just use the drywall, right? We have to put it up anyways. And anytime I can take one material and make it do 2 or 3 or 4 things, then I've kind of keep having the cost of all of the different things I need, right? For example, the drywall, it's aesthetic. So if it costs $1,000 to put the drywall up, and I know it's cheap, just follow me with the math, right? And I put it up because it's aesthetically pleasing. It cost me $1,000 to look pretty. But if it's now the air barrier and it looks pretty, then it costs me $500 to look pretty and $500 to be an air barrier. So I keep having those costs and sharing those costs to solve multiple problems in my budget, because over here I have all of the things I need to do, and then over here I have the cost of doing those things I need to do. So anytime I can have a number of things here go to one cost, then I'm really becoming very, very efficient instead of all of these things going to their own costs, right? Where you have dollars attached to every one of those things. So anytime I can get that one thing to do more, then it's a benefit to the project. And in this case here, we are putting drywall up. We knew we were going to put drywall up to provide the finish. The question is, okay, how do I use the drywall as an air barrier? Well, the first rule of air barrier is, yeah, you guessed it, my favorite word, continuity, right? Continuity is the key. You've heard me say that pretty much every time I do an air barrier video, because it's true. Continuity is the key. I'm either inside or outside, and there is a continuous red line around me. And so if continuity is the key, then what is the first kind of plan of attack for the drywall? Well, it's probably to eliminate discontinuity, right? If I came in here traditionally and I frame up all the walls, then I end up with all of these compartmentalized spaces that need drywall, right? And it kind of really wreaks havoc on my concept of continuity. Whereas if I said for a minute, and this is me thinking back in 2009, I mean, I still think this way, but back in 2009, what if I get rid of the discontinuity of the traditional sequence and I look at the drywall as one big plane, right? And I get rid of all of this stuff. Wow. Now we're cooking with gas, right? We're maintaining continuity, and we're making it a key aspect of the design. So how do we do that, right? Obviously, we got to get the drywaller or the general contractor on board, because he's got to work with the drywaller and get that kind of sequenced properly, because they're obviously going to have to come in after the roof goes on, but before they frame any of the second floor walls. So we can do that. But even if I do that, I have another problem, right? That continuity creates a problem, because I have another level of discontinuity, and this one comes via the fire department and the code, right? Both of which say we need to get access to the attic. Now, this roof above the drywall is roughly, I don't know, R90 plus. It's probably closing in on 100. So that's, 25, 26 inches of cellulose up there. Yeah, that's not something, hey, we just poke a little hole in the ceiling in a little scuttle here and, build a 30-inch tube up through the 30 inches of insulation. So the thing that I came up with in talking with Christian, who was the owner of the Valley Group, that was the general contractor out here, and they were just such great guys to work with. This was the only project I ever did do with them, but man, it was a real treat to work with them. We thought about it and said, you know what? When you think about what it is the fire department really wants and what the code is getting at is, if there's smoke coming out of the roof of the house, they want to get access to the attic, because they want to see, where's that smoke coming from? What's generating that smoke? Is there a fire in the attic? What's going on up there? So rather than do a scuttle hole, I went to Christian and said, hey, we have this gable wall up here. What if we put a door in the attic? We build a little platform so that the firemen can throw a ladder up, they can climb up, open the door, step in on a platform, and get 100% visual access across that attic and be able to see what they need to see. It solves all of their problems. Now, the only thing we had to do was go to the building inspector and the fire department and petition our solution. And so we did. I forget the gentleman's name. I can picture the building inspector at the time. He actually retired a couple of years after this, because I did another passive house down there and he was no longer the building inspector. But he was a great guy. And the thing, I know building inspectors, they get a really bad rap because they got a crap job to do. right? Most of the time, they have to tell you when you're doing something wrong, and nobody ever wants to be told they're doing something wrong. So they're inherently in a pretty difficult position. But this gentleman here, we went to him and said, hey, you know, this is why you have that. This is why we believe it's in code. This is how we're going to solve that problem. Can we do it? And he immediately says, yeah, I'm fine with that. Just get it, the fire marshal or fire inspector to sign off of it. Most fire departments have that one person that kind of handles building reviews and such for compliance for fire. So we went to that fire inspector and we petitioned that, and he said, yeah, sure, you know, just make sure. He had some minimum requirements, you know, make sure that door, we told him, I don't know, it's like 3 feet tall, maybe 28 inches wide. He said, you know, it's got to be big enough for somebody to climb in. Make sure there's a platform up there someone can successfully stand on, even in a crouch position. They don't necessarily have to be able to stand in the attic. But anyways, they both approved, and so we moved on. Now, that isn't the end of our problems. We've solved not putting a scuttle in. We've still maintained a beautiful continuous. We actually got the drywaller on board. We got the framer on board. So everybody's on board. But now we have the electrician, the plumber, and the other trades. They become the question. And the question is, well, if we're going to put the drywall in real early in the sequence, well, how does the electrician get up into the attic to run wires? How does the plumber get up there to put in his plumbing vent? And even though we minimized a bunch of the electrical and minimized a bunch of the plumbing, the question is how did we get these guys and gals the opportunity to get up there and do their job without having to go outside, right? You don't want to go outside, climb up a 36 feet of ladder or something, 30 feet of ladder, and then climb in through a little hole every time you want to go upstairs into the attic. So we had to provide that. So the solution there was we actually did create a scuttle. We created a scuttle in this bathroom here, and it was probably on the order of about 4 foot by 4 foot. We basically left a perimeter here of 12 inches plus, and you'll understand why in a second. That 4 foot by 4 foot hole, now they could put a step ladder underneath. They can go up and down in the attic like they would on any other project, even though we had the whole thing drywalled except for that 4 foot by 4 foot scuttle. And why did we choose that room, right? We chose that room because it provided us a hole of decent size, but it was still one of the smallest rooms on the second floor. So if you go up into this house today, you'll find this room is 8 foot, this room is 8 foot, this room is 8 foot. All of these spaces here are 8 foot, but this room is 7 foot 11 and a half. And the reason for that is we had the walls in that room with the ceiling. We cut the hole in the ceiling there, right? We cut that hole in the ceiling, and then we came back when the drywaller did all of the walls, and pretty much everything was roughed in the attic, and the drywaller simply, I'm just going to change color here, put another layer of board there. And by keeping that 12 inches, that gave us 2 flanges or 4 flanges around the perimeter where we could run a couple beads of acoustical sealant and then push that second level of sealing up, thus sealing up that 4 foot hole. That bathroom is 1/2 inch lower. Nobody is ever the wiser. You're not going to walk in there and say, hey, I just went in the bathroom. This room here is, why is the ceiling 1/2 inch lower than that one? You're never going to know. Nobody knows. It's our dirty little secret. But it solved our problem. We maintained continuity, but we provided access. So let's take a quick look here. Here's one of the shots that I took you can see, here's the perimeter, and there's all of our drywall. Now, the drywall subcontractor, it was pretty funny because on this project, like I said, this was my very first passive house project. In fact, this was one of the very first passive house projects in the country. And sitting there with the drywaller, he's like, yeah, he was reluctant to do it. He kind of hemmed and hawed, like trades guys and gals do. But he was pretty decent and in compliance. Like, hey, I'll do whatever we have to do. I just, I don't agree with it. It's going to cost me more time, more work, blah, blah, blah. And he was a small outfit. It was him and his son, I believe, and I think one other helper. There was 3 of them. And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. So anyways, he did it. I made sure I went down there the day they did it and had a conversation with him. And he said, Steve, he goes, I kind of owe you an apology. And he goes, I was, real skeptical about this. He goes, if we could do every house like this, he goes, man, I would love to do that, right? Look at the sheets he's putting up, right? These are massive, massive sheets. Him and his 2 guys did that whole 2nd floor ceiling in the morning of a day, right? They put it up and then hit all the joints. He's like, it was probably the fastest, 1,000 feet of board we've ever installed because there was nothing in the way. There was no little closets, scuttles, bathrooms, linen closets, none of this stuff where you're cutting up board. There was little to no waste because we're putting up big, 4 by 12, 4 by 16 foot sheets of drywall, and they're going up as large single sheets. That went very, very fast, and he was totally in favor of it. Now the framers got to come back. They have a little bit of head scratching, but you know what? With today's lasers and all of these layout tricks and tools that you have, it really isn't that hard to get in there and frame the wall. And we actually learned a couple tricks on framing walls and being able to rotate them into place and this and that. So anyways, they found that highly favorable. And then you can see here's that scuttle door, right? We just went to our lumberyard and we got them to make up a door. It was a flat panel door, and then the siders, just basically we set the door so that it was in plane with the wall, and then we just trimmed it out and sided it. And it fits right in. It's over on kind of the blind side of the house, so you don't really see it unless you literally go walking into the edge of the woods and look up. But that is our fire person's scuttle. So that gets them in and out of that attic space. And yeah, so there you have it. That's our air barrier strategy for the ceiling of our Passive House 11. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If this was your first video of the series, make sure you go back and check. I'm, trying to dump a ton of information here. I know, a lot of people think about information as something personal and that's theirs. My mentor, Joe Stieberg of Building Science Corporation in this aspect, he always believed that we should be getting information from those in front of us, figuring it out, reassessing it, and then we should be passing it on to everybody behind us. In that we're curators of information, not owners. Nobody owns information, right? And nobody today is reinventing the wheel. We might make a better wheel, we might make it out of different materials, but somebody that made the wheel thousands of years ago, we're still using their idea. We're just using it in a slightly different fashion, different material, different use, right? So the same with any of our building ideas. We're not rebuilding building. A lot of these things, this here, there was nothing about this. We used some sealants, we used drywall, we moved things around in the sequence, but there's no I would say, major innovation besides just taking a long, hard look, a nice conscious effort into what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and questioning those aspects of it and trying to figure out, is there a better way that suits our needs here on this project today? And we found them. And I'm here 14 years later, and I'm sharing that information with you. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm Steve, Basic Architect. This is our Passive House 11 series. That was episode 12, where we talked about air barrier strategies at the ceiling of the second floor. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Click on that subscribe button. Go tell all your friends you just watched the most awesome video on air barrier strategies, and tell them to smash that subscribe button. Until next time, long live our building.